Hi, welcome to Erudite DM. This is Mike, and I'm doing a guest interview today, some Q&A with writer Zac Goins, who's writing with RPG Ramblings. Hello, Zac.
Hello, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing well, and I just said a few minutes ago in the prep that I've listened to so many of these type of interviews. I don't think it's going to be too much of a challenge because it's just a conversation. And
Yep.
I'm a talker anyway, and I'm coming off of about 4 cups of coffee this morning. So I hope I can keep it going, or I'm going to crash and you'll be talking and I'll be over here passed
That's right.
out.
Mike's asleep. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope that doesn't happen. I'm sure it won't because of what we're talking about. So the reason Zac is here with me is because I was in Dallas last week for North Texas RPG Con. I got to meet Jeff Jones Jeff's in Kansas City as well, or Kansas City area. I know he's in Kansas, but
so he's in like Metamora, Illinois, center of it. So.
Okay. All right. So you guys are from that part of the country, and I'm down in Houston. And I met Jeff when I came across his booth, and these two beauties were sitting there on the table, which I was very familiar with because I'm all about Shadow Dark right now at this time and playing a lot of Shadow Dark. And I just had to have these books. So they are The Tower of Six and Dark Visions, which, Zac, I'm going to turn it to you here in a second. I'm just going to briefly introduce them. They were both released on Kickstarter at the same time early this year.
Yep.
That's fair. Tower of Six, from having scanned it, I've not read it to cover, and I've not played either one of these yet, but appears to be a somewhat Lovecraftian, very much Cthulhu, new monsters, a setting of a scary tower for you and your players to play Shadow Dark in and probably not survive. But hey, that's half the fun. Roll up some new characters. And then Dark Visions, which I got in hardback, which is really cool. They use the inside covers. I don't know how much of that you can see, but really just a really cool book. Looks and feels very Shadow Dark. Belongs in that publisher setting for Arcane Library. You will recognize it when you open it up. It's all about cults, and I think there's how many, Zac? A dozen cults or so, maybe more.
I want to say there's like 16, something like that.
Yeah, it looks like it. Really, really interesting stuff there you can see in the table of contents. As well as new character classes, a Covenant Knight, which I have a thing for knights right now. I've always wanted more knights in D&D and then later games, including Shadow Dark. So I'll turn it over to you. Tell us a little about these two and why folks should pick them up on drive-through. I'll also post the links for your drive-through and so forth, so they can purchase them in the comments with the show.
Yeah, so Dark Visions came out of Jeff and I have been working together for several years now in different capacities, and at some point Jeff said he kind of said, Zac, we'll do a book that you want, like something about a topic that you really enjoy. What would you really like to do? And talking back and forth, we kind of settled that cults would be really fun. That's one of my favorite topics. And then we sat on that idea for, I don't know, a year. At one point, it might have been an OSE book. At another point, it was going to be DCC. And then I got into the thick of Shadow Dark. I ran a almost year-long campaign of my own. And coming out of that campaign, I said, Jeff, I think that the system that really needs a cult supplement right now that doesn't have one is Shadow Dark. And so after those two kind of bled together, the idea of a cult book and then welding it with Shadow Dark, it just kind of took off. And I think I wrote both books in about 2 months' time. And they were super fun. It definitely is one of my favorite things to write about.
Yeah, that's amazing. You knocked it out in such a short amount of time, which he had told me about at the convention. I don't know. I mean, I'm just starting out and have so much to learn from guys like you, but it seems like sometimes when you're inspired and you really have an idea down, it just all comes out at one blur, Now the editing and the rewrites and the finding type that goes on for a while, the edit part of it. But without getting too sidetracked, I didn't realize you'd been playing a game. Did you start with a quick start when you were playing for that first year?
No, I actually, so I'm one of the people who didn't back the Kickstarter for various reasons, none of which are good. But afterwards, I run a lot of games. I run a lot of different systems. And I've always wanted to run a Moria game.
Hmm.
Um, but it needs the right system for that big, like almost mega dungeon feel. Um, and so I hadn't stumbled across a system that I liked for it yet. And so about a year ago, I found Shadow Dark, stumbled into it, started reading it, and was like, "Yeah, this is exactly what I want." So I picked up the core book, picked up the zines, and kind of honed down some of the player options. We basically had 18 players in 3 different groups that ran in parallel in the same campaign. So they were different dwarf clans working together to complete objectives and retaking Moria. Um, and it was super fun. We used the Free League's new Moria campaign book as our basis, but
Yeah.
everything was in Shadow Dark, and it was
That's
it
a
was awesome.
beautiful, beautiful book. The maps. I haven't even played that system yet, but I have that one book on my shelf over here just for the maps alone. I'm sure a
It's
lot of us did.
perfect. It's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So playing Shadow Dark and having some experience with it, obviously very helpful before you start writing for it.
yeah.
I won't give you a number. You pick. Just what were some of your favorite home brews? Because like every system, people kind of go, and Kelsey's system allows for that. If you want to play where you get XP from encounters also in combat, you can do that. Or you can play
Hmm.
this version over here with max hit points, or how you do character generation. What are 2 or 3, 4 of your favorite home brews you found
Oh
comfortable?
goodness, that's a great question. I'm trying to think. So I guess things that'll tell you right out the gate is since my players were basically like 95% of them were dwarves. The torch timer we made, like they kept track of it themselves and they kept it up. So torches, like your torch running out by surprise, was way less likely because I figured dwarves know how long their torch should last. It shouldn't
Yeah,
be
of
a
all the
random thing.
ancestries or races or whatever, they probably would know better than anybody, right?
Yep. And then let's see, I took out like the top 5% of the treasure tables
Mhm.
and I replaced them with basically you getting to roll on the different magic item tables. Um, because one of the things that I realized very quickly is, um, you know, in the Moria campaign, obviously they don't have all those cool magic items in the back of the core book seeded. And so if I was going to get some of those fun magic items in, I was going, or that just the armor sets or different cool things, I was going to need to find a way to get them into the treasure tables more easily. So I just stripped out the top 5 and said, hey, if you roll good enough on those treasure tables, you should get something very special. And that became that. I really like that. I thought that worked. For XP, I pretty much kept it to um, what Kelsey spells out. I would say that some things that we definitely did were trophies. So the first time they killed a monster that they had never seen before, if they brought back a piece of it, they could get XP from that.
Dude, I love that. Have you ever seen Headhunter?
Uh-uh,
The
uh-uh.
guy, the guy from Norway, I think it's Norway or Sweden, made this little movie. I think you can find it on Netflix or you can watch it on pay-per-view. But great, it is Shadow Dark slash D&D. You need to watch
Oh, sweet.
Headhunter. Yeah,
Headhunter.
you can,
Okay.
rent it for $4 one night.
Yeah.
Um, it's awesome. It fits very much into this vibe, and it's about that idea. He takes the heads of the monsters he kills, and they're on a wall in his cabin out in the woods.
Yeah, I really like that. I think it worked out well. There's a little reference to it in the core book, but we kind of just pushed that out, expanded it, and then we did on treasure. There's not this like perfect one-to-one in the core book about like
Yeah,
what if you find a chest full of gold, how much treasure points is that?
yeah,
And so the thing for us was that became very important because Moria is filled with treasure and it's filled with artifacts and dwarven, uh, 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 relics and things that have meaning to them, even if they're not magical. And so pretty much everything they found, I assigned treasure points to. Magic items, I assigned treasure points to everything. And so if they could get it back to their base camp, they could turn it in. And that made a lot of sense when you have like things like statues or something that doesn't have a lot of use. But by assigning treasure points to every single magic item, it
yeah.
also meant that they had this decision-making process every time they got back about, do we keep this? Do we want to share it with somebody else in the group? Do we want to hand it to another clan? Or do we permanently trade it in for treasure? And that was a fun debate that they had just about every session was, is this magic item something that it let me hand out a lot of magic items because I knew they were going to filter through them, because resource management in Moria is such a big deal. Hauling, you got to have enough gear to get in and go far into the mines, but then you also have to be able to carry out a ton of treasure. So you can't have half your gear slots filled up with magic items that you have just in case. You kind of have to whittle it down to, what do I think is the most important thing I can be carrying?
And did you guys have hirelings or somebody to help carry porters and things, NPCs?
No.
So
I made
were
them.
you hauling all that through? Because Moria, it's not like you're going back to the town and the village to carouse for the night. You're down
No,
there. You're in there. Yeah.
exactly. They had a base camp at the East Gate, and if they got back there, they could turn in anything and they could restock with supplies. But they would dive in, and they might be gone 2, 3, 4 days or several sessions, and then have to come back. We did a thing where basically every section of the mine, when you first explored it, you were discovering things, so you had to make more checks. There was more chances for random encounters, yada yada
Yeah.
yada. Once you are going back through an explored area, all we did was we just rolled a d6 for a random encounter, and on a 1 you had a random encounter, but it was way less likely. So there was this effect of basically fast travel. Hey, we're 6 regions in, but we've explored heavily all of those regions. We want to get out of here. Okay, well, you're just going to need to roll a d6 6 times and hope you don't roll a 1 to
Yeah,
get
and then you
back.
could boot scoot right through because you had that reduced danger level that Shadow Dark uses, and
Yeah,
for random
exactly.
encounters. That's very cool. Well, now I'm thinking, gee, man, if you could only get access to that IP, you could do Moria for
It'd be
Shadow
super cool.
Dark.
It'd be very
Hey,
cool.
that
Yeah.
opens up a whole other thing. I'm not sure Free League would be too crazy about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm guilty. I talked too much. I got us
That's
way
great.
off track here, but that was fun. Maybe we need to talk about that another day.
Sure.
I'd like to see. Is that campaign, was that done and recorded? Can people find it on YouTube?
It was not recorded. No.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's all
You'll just
right.
have to hear about it. We'll have to come back and tell you all about it sometime.
Yeah, that would be fun. I think people would really be into that because if anybody, RPG types like us who love Tolkien, they all zero in on Moria, right? It was
Yeah.
the big shift in Fellowship of the Ring, and suddenly we're like, oh, I recognize this. In my case, I
Exactly.
read the books first, and then discovered some skater boys in the neighborhood stopped and said, "Hey, let's go play D&D." I'm like, "What? What are we doing?" It was like, "Oh, I know what hobbits are. I know what orcs are. I've just read all this stuff, as a kid." So it was perfect,
Yeah.
good timing. Okay, so let's go back to Tower of Six maybe first, and then we'll go to Dark Visions. And you don't have to deep dive
Yeah.
here, but just tell us some of the rich, good stuff. What's someone going to find here for their game? Whether is it usable in a one shot? Is it usable with their campaign? That kind of thing.
Yeah. So, like you said, Dark Visions has like a chunk on cults and character classes and spells and things like that. But then, kind of the back of the book, you'll find 2 adventures, in Cultist Wake and As Above, So Below. And then Tower of Six is the
Oh,
zine that's outside. And those really play in as a loose trilogy. In Cultist Wake, you talked about a one shot. That's like a really strong one shot. You can easily get it done in an evening. It's basically your 5-room dungeon.
what
Maybe a little
levels?
bit more than 5 rooms.
What levels do you
First
think?
level. First
Okay, so
level.
starting.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So if you have a gauntlet, maybe do that first. But Cult's Wake will get you through in a session. You'll find some fun treasure. You get a taste of a nightmare cult that's digging up this shrine, and you're kind of coming in after this cult has cleared the dungeon, so to speak, and you're coming in behind them and figuring out what they've been up to. Um, and then As Above, So Below is a probably more like 2 or 3 sessions. Um, it takes place in this ruin between 2 mountains where that same cult is digging up artifacts there as well. And there's kind of more to be discovered there about what's going on, because the cultists are still heavily there. They're still active, and there's all sorts of bits and pieces that you can discover. That one is very much a standalone. You could play it just as it is, but if you've played in Cultist Wake, you'll get some of the same vibes, and it's the same cult. If you play both of those, then you'll have plenty of information that will lead you to the Tower of Six. Or again, Tower of Six can be played on its own. There's hooks for that. Tower of Six is much larger. It's like a 27 room, quote unquote, dungeon. It's actually a tower with a dungeon underneath. And kind of the premise of it is that quite some time ago, some mages locked a eldritch terror for DMs out there in Aboleth. They kind of sealed it off in a chamber deep in these caverns. And then they built the tower above it to serve as like a bastion to ensure that no one ever came in and like released this creature. Well, the mages have all died or gone off, and now the cult has found this tower, and they have gathered enough relics and artifacts to enact a ritual here. And you're coming in maybe just in time to stop them. We'll see.
Yeah, it reminded me. I don't know if you ever read Glenn Cook, The Black Company, but it
Yep.
reminded me of, okay, instead of what was that, the Barrow Lord or whatever the guy was who was what's her name's husband, the real bad guy, had been buried.
Oh, yes.
They thought eternity, and he's coming out. I'm like, okay, this is, except for it's a Lovecraft tentacled thing, presumably that's coming out here. And who doesn't love tentacles?
Yeah, I was reading She Is the Darkness by Glenn Cook when I was writing this, so glad you picked up on a little bit of
and that's
that
what makes
reference
it fun is, and I don't mean that in a way like it's oh, this is tropey, I've heard this before. You know why we play these games? Because we've heard all this stuff before, and we want to do it again. We want to play them again, right? Everybody wants Frankenstein and Dracula and the Mummy and Lovecraft and Tolkien. So that's a good thing. That's meant as a compliment. One other thing here, and then we'll go on to the Devoured Labyrinth. I'm looking at the page for the Covenant Knight here. And isn't that art cool? And I have to admit, when I first saw this, I'm like, this I thought one word, Jedi. So when I went there, I was expecting to see some kind of Templar thing, which would probably be more my deal and the stuff I write. But I'm like, oh wow, are we using psionics here, or what are we doing? But you mind just spending just a few minutes telling them about the Covenant Knight class? Because one thing I wanted to say is, when you buy these books, like the better Shadow Dark supplements, they have a life expectancy beyond playing through the one shot or the little mini campaign setting there. There's nuggets, there's monsters you can take and play for the rest of your Shadow Dark life, right? Or those classes and so forth. So take a minute. Just tell us a little about the Covenant Knight, if you remember that far back.
Yeah. So Covenant Knight, I like the Knight of St. Idris that Kelsey put out. I like the idea of like different knight orders being different classes. And so the Covenant Knight is an approach to that. I think there was a reference to covenants in a covenant council, maybe in the core book in the deity section. I think it's been a while. And so this knight is for players of lawful alignment, whereas the Idris Knight is chaos alignment. You can cast spells that are pre-spells that and they have a cool thing where they have an ability called Final Word, where if you hit something with a weapon attack, you can deal max damage, and you can do a number of times based on your level. And then you have advantage checks to resist abilities of demons and devils. So I really just see this as kind of like the mirror of the Knight of St. Idris. Likely is that most groups will be loath to have a chaotic Dark Knight in their campaign. I'm like, I think the Covenant Knight could see a lot of use, though.
It felt odd at first, just like having goblins and the half-orcs ancestors mixed in with your, how am I going to play an elf paladin or something with a goblin in the group? I want to kill it.
Yeah, exactly right. And so, it's like, well, if and it also helped because I also have a cultist and an inquisitor in this book class wise, and those are both like, the cultist is very dark and kind of another evil class in many ways. And then the inquisitor is very devout and resolute and like brutal. And they cast out judgments like the Mark of Hellfire and the Mark of Radiance. So I thought it'd be cool to have a Covenant Knight, which is a way of approaching divinity, but not in a chaotic way, and not also in this like absolutely brutal, like um, no compromise way that the Inquisitors always feel. So yeah. Anyhow.
Yeah, this is great, guys. There are beyond the new classes in here. There's also spells. There's cultist backgrounds, and hey, kind of like the bonus to me was the extra deities.
Yeah.
Because and that's great. She did a cool job with the 9, and I love the fact that we have a missing 2. That I swear one weekend I'm going to just drill down and write up something about who those 2 are. Or they've been found. I don't know, something. I'm sure I'm not the only one. That's like the $1 million question in the deities.
Yeah.
But you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 other deities here to explore, along with magics and myths. It's just such a rich, for a book this thick, this thing's packed.
Yeah.
So again, I mentioned it earlier. I will put the drive-through link to go check this out. And if you want the PDF or you want the book, you know what to do on drive-through and get that done. I don't have an affiliate, by the way. I only met Jeff at the con and I bought their book. So they're, I feel like I should say that because everybody else does. I don't think anybody's worried whether I bought it or not, or you gave it to me, but I did buy them. So this is all unsolicited advice and appraisals here. So, all right, well, let's shift gears if you're comfortable, and let's talk about the new Kickstarter, which is for the Devoured Labyrinth. I have not seen, so we're all on this side. I'm with the listeners here. Pitch it to us. Tell us what it's about.
Yeah, so Devoured came out of kind of the very close out of that Moria campaign. So like I said, I had 18 players, and most of those players are writers or designers that I've become friends with over the years. And so we came out of it and we said, I like putting a capstone on certain things. And so we were kind of chatting about what we might do. And I had this idea of doing a book of dungeons. So quickly that became a book of 1 and 2 page dungeons, because I think that's a resource that just about any GM can get use out of. It's also something that when I have 20 people who all want to contribute to a book, that's a great way to get a lot of writers in there.
Contributors, yeah, sure.
Without them tripping over themselves, so to speak. And so what you're going to find with Devoured is a little over 40 dungeons that are almost all 1 and 2 pages. There is a gauntlet at the beginning that's 6 pages, and there's a couple bonus things in the back that are a little bit larger, but by and large, it's 1 and 2 page dungeons. They're divided into sections that are based off of level by and large. So the first section of 9 dungeons is, we call it the Goblin Hidey Hole section, but it's basically a bunch of goblins and lower level monsters, lower level undead. Then you'll upgrade to the Central Jungle, which is like a lot of Viperians, still a lot of undead, a lot of beasts, a lot of like plant creatures, things like that.
Kind of a Howard feel.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of thing. Yeah,
exactly. And then we go to the labyrinth itself, which is like this underground series of network of tunnels and caverns. Lots of drow in there, especially, and undead, still higher level undead. And then you do the demon frontier, which is drow / demons. And then finally you get the giant hills, which have giants and maybe a dragon. So
that means there's a dragon.
Yeah, that means
for those of you who didn't catch that, maybe there's a dragon. He wouldn't have mentioned it if there were not a dragon in there.
Right. Yeah. So it's like they're all 100% standalone things, but we've kind of placed them on a hex map that we've put together of this region called the Devoured Labyrinth, which is kind of like this valley out of time, so to speak. So if you play through multiples of them, you could move through the hexes and get a campaign out of it. But there's nothing that will keep you. There's not a storyline that's going to get in the way of you pulling random adventures out of here and playing them in your own campaign. I know I was already talking to someone on the Shadow Dark Discord that said that he has like a massive 400 hex campaign that he's running, and they have already seeded my adventures from the preview into that. So that's perfect. That's kind of as intended.
Yeah, I love pieces that are modular. I think most GMs do, right? Because then I can take it and I can twist it and turn it however I need. And if we're already playing something, but this area's grown stale, then I just plug and play, something from Devoured Labyrinth and go on.
Exactly. Yeah, I think the big thing about it was it became a really big challenge and a really fun challenge. I think not just for me, but for all the writers and my co-lead Andrew. Like the idea of a one-page dungeon is actually, in at least my opinion, very challenging to do, especially to do multiple times and make sure that none of these dungeons feel like the others. Um, and each one has an interesting idea, an interesting narrative, an interesting backstory. There's interesting things to find. There's an interesting counter or two or three in there, like all of that, and then punch it down to like typically these dungeons are about 300 words or so. So you got to get really, really tight. And we pulled a lot of that from actually Pirate Borg,
Oh
which
yeah, yeah.
I'm I work on the Pirate Borg team as well, and Luke has done a really good job with some one-page dungeons or some really punchy dungeons or adventures. And so we kind of drew some inspiration from what he did there, plus Mary Mushman, their
Love.
adventures,
I did the
which are
Kickstarter
fantastic.
for Knock 5. I love those guys. They're awesome stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, they're some of the best.
And
And
going back
so
to Pirate Borg, I almost get the feeling sometimes that Pirate Borg probably did better than the whole Merc Borg game itself. I mean, by itself, it's just been an all star. There are people that
well, we're
probably
definitely
never
having
played
fun over
Merc
there.
Borg, but yeah.
Yeah, it's good. I like if you like Merkborg, but you want like pirate scene, you're gonna be great. If you didn't like Merkborg because you felt like it was too chaotic or um, too gloomy, I think Pirate Borg winds back a little bit from that, and the layout's a little bit more legible. So yeah, I think
I
it's a
don't
good
think I'm
option.
unusual here, and maybe you do. I'm sure you do the same thing, but I'm a poacher as a GM, so I'll see something that I like in Mythic Bastion Land, or
Hmm.
or in Knave 2e, or
Hmm.
in Pirate Borg, and I'm like, I'm going to use that element or that magic item, and I'm plugging it into because I'm playing Shadow Dark right now, and so I borrow. I think a lot of us probably do that. So
Yeah, exactly,
crossover.
exactly. Now, anyhow, it's I don't know. That's really all that the book is. There's a big, beautiful hex map that we had commissioned at the front, and then it's a mountain of dungeons, and then in the very back of it, there's a couple of like little bonus things that you can insert into the hex if you want. But it's that plus, I guess, we are also doing a crawler deck on that Kickstarter, which is like a nice slipcase deck of tarot-sized cards that have level 0 and level 1 pre-gens. There's about 40 of them in there right now. And then it also comes with um, a stack of 50 what we call gear sheets. And these gear sheets are designed to look good, look like they're just continuing off the bottom. Let's see if I can do this on the screen. Off the bottom of your pre-gen tarot card, and you can like add to your gear, add to your
Oh, cool.
reduce hit
Yeah,
points, add your XP in there. So you can write on this, and then the top card just stays static as a
awesome.
principle.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
smart. Really flexible, and use it again and again and again.
exactly. So that's what we got. Yeah.
I love that. And I will put the link to the Kickstarter in the show notes too, so you guys can go check that out. And again, what is the close date on the Kickstarter?
We're closing on the morning of June 27th, which is a Friday.
All right, so you get about 2 weeks to play with from this recording time. So I encourage everyone to check that out. Zac, I mentioned at the beginning I met RPG Ramblings. I knew the name, but I had not met or spoken with Jeff before the show, and I kept coming back to the vendor room and hanging out with him, and we talked about Traveler and all kinds of different
Yeah.
things, and
Yeah.
Gary's Appendix N and whatever other stuff he had there as well. Do you do many cons? Do you do any of these things where you get up and talk about writing or your
Oh,
process?
yeah. Oh, yeah. I love shows. I've been doing shows since 2019, which so not that long, but I do somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 15 shows a year.
Holy cow.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, it's nice in that you know, I, I like doing them, and I would go. There's shows that I'll go and just run a bunch of games. There's shows where I'll go just do a bunch of panels. But then working with Limithron, Pyreborg, I go and I work a lot of shows at their booth, that side of things too.
Yeah,
So
complementary type. Yeah, makes sense.
exactly right. So it's yeah, I think shows are one of my absolute favorite things. We just got back actually with Fireboard Crew. We just got back from a couple of shows in the UK last week, and we're headed to Origins Game Fair in Columbus, Ohio this coming week. So it's we do have a big con circuit. Yeah.
Yeah, I did look for you on. Are you on X or any of the other channels? If people reach out, or are you too busy for that?
No, I'm on Facebook, and you can friend me on Discord. I'm just Zac Goins on both of those, I think.
Yeah, I'd
Um,
probably be more inclined for Discord. Facebook, I don't do too much. Although it
yeah,
was helpful with the con for North Texas. That's where all the
oh
information
yeah,
really was on Facebook. So.
yeah. I I have enough groups in Facebook. There's enough good groups in there that I still remain, and Messenger's nice. Um, and you can find me on X, but I'm not active on there really anymore. So, um,
Yeah. Well, man, this is awesome. I appreciate you giving me the time, and we put this together on kind of short notice. Maybe we can talk again month after the piece comes out and people have it in their hands.
that'd be
You know,
great.
I
Yeah.
would love to talk about it and maybe we'll do a live stream so people who've started playing it or reading it can either yell at you and call you names on the live stream. I'm sure that won't be the case, or tell you how much they
That'd be
love it. I'm
perfect.
sure. I'm sure it'll
That's
be the
great.
case. They're telling you, "Gee, I love this thing, and here's what I like about it. Here's how I'm using it." And I feed off the opinions and the ideas of other people. I mean, hell, you've given me 3 or 4 ideas here just talking.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So really great stuff. Anything else you want to add? Anything else upcoming we need to know about beyond the con circuit?
Oh,
Writing
well,
anything new? You want
yeah.
to tease?
I'll tease a few things, I guess, because that's fun. You mentioned Jeff, and I do a lot of things with Jeff, and we've got Gary's Appendix 8 coming out very soon, so keep your eye out for that. Gary's Appendix is a OSE/OSR zine of articles and expanded bestiary. So he typically crams about 6 articles from different people in there, and then he writes the expanded bestiary entries for OSE. We're on issue 8, and I think that'll launch on Kickstarter first part of July. And then in August-ish, I'm launching a very big project called Raptor Ruckus, which is like Jurassic Park by way of Morkborg. So if you like survival horror and dinosaurs, you're gonna feel right at home with Raptor
Yeah, I kind of
Ruckus.
feel like that's a niche within the niche that doesn't get enough attention in this space.
Exactly.
And I'm not sure I would run a game, but I grew up in the era of all those old what was his name? Doug McClure. They made fun of him on The Simpsons. I'm Troy McClure. Remember on The Simpsons?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
The old, James Mason Journey, the Sin of the Earth kind of movie,
yeah.
popular in
Yes,
early and mid '60s.
yes,
But yeah,
yes.
a lot of that doesn't get carried over sometimes. I would certainly play it. It'd be a hoot. I mean, I can't imagine trying to hack away at a dinosaur and the hit points involved and getting
Yeah,
stabbed.
it's definitely tricky because like you say, like dinosaurs are, especially big dinos, are not something that you should be taking a handgun to, and so it's more about can you evade or escape or hide or whatever you can do. So it's been fun to kind of like strip down the Borg system and rebuild it not as a combat heavy game, but as a survival and like chase scene heavy game, um, which
Yeah.
which which is super fun. So
You just hit on one of the things, and we can wrap it up. But one
hey,
thing you just reminded me of with Shadow Dark is, if I read it right in the notes in the core rule book, I think Kelsey made the point that your players need to quickly learn the wisdom of running from a fight and not
mhm.
engaging in every fight and not fighting every fight to the end. But we still do it. We still do it. I don't hear people talk about that. That might be a different video one night too. A good topic to kick around, because I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't. Hey, are we being cowardly, or are we feel like we're supposed to kill everything and run through it, but that'll get you dead really fast in Shadow Dark.
Well, listen, let's take 5 minutes on this because I have an opinion.
Okay, take as long as you want.
Yeah.
Take as long as you want, man.
So I don't agree with that part of the book. Can I say that?
Hey, I have a couple of things. They're not serious. I
Yeah.
could have told the woman she was there at the con, but
Yeah.
I was kind of starstruck. And other than hello, I love your stuff, that was about it.
It's amazing stuff. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with the stuff. But like I think that and somebody will probably yell at me, but I think that we should look at the character sheet to understand what we're supposed to do in a game. Now, I know that like you can do a million things that aren't on your character sheet, but when we think about like what is this game about and what are you as a character about in a game, whether you're playing Shadowdark or D&D or One Ring or anything else, like you look at your character sheet, you look at if the game has skills, you say what skills are listed, because that's going to give me some insight on what this game prioritizes. If there's not skills listed, what abilities does my character have? What are the classes like, right? All of these things. And when I look at Shadowdark, just like I look at D&D, I say this is a monster fighting game. This is a go into dungeons, kill things, take loot, get out. It's there's nothing on that sheet that communicates that um, being overly sneaky, overly like get out of here, run away, try to survive that way is really what I should be doing. There's no abilities in the game, period, in any class that are like, oh, if you get into an initiative that you don't want to be in, you can use this ability to get out quickly. Every ability is about staying in the fight. And so when I see that, I say, and I see that, like, even though she talks about it's not really a game designed for balance, there's also a lot of balance in the game, and in the design of the adventures that are put together for it, and for everything. So I look at all that and I say, this is not a game where running away should be option A, B, or C. It's a game where, yes, there are times where the story necessitates, maybe it's just the story of the dungeon, right? Like even a dungeon tells a story, even if there's not a through narrative, but maybe there's a moment where you're supposed to encounter a dragon in room 3, but really you're not supposed to fight it till closer to room 30. Being able to run away is something that I think should be held off in limited respects. It should be something that only really happens in the off fringe case, because I think by default what's communicated to players is you're big, cool badasses, and you have a character sheet full of cool abilities and magic weapons and stuff that you're going to want to put to use. Why would you want to throw all that away to skedaddle? So.
Yeah, unless you're halfway through and you've already got some excessive damage. I mean, there's always practicalities.
There's definitely,
you don't want to fight this thing. We just got beat up and down the hall.
When in Moria, when my players were moving back through, right, trying to get back to base, and they're laden with treasure, they don't want to fight anything, right? Sure. So they roll up a random encounter. Yeah, they're like, can we try to get away, or can we focus fire to bring half of the creatures down quickly so that we can start making morale checks if they fail, and then we can get out. But we're not interested in fighting this whole combat. So I agree with you. There are definitely instances where that it doesn't apply.
Yeah, Kelsey's been pretty good. When she was doing the Western Reaches, she was on every night she was on a live stream someplace, and it was great. And I got to, one time I asked her a couple of questions about travel, and she's like, nah, the overland hex stuff and the core rules will be supplanted with Western Reaches. There are new rules coming that will replace those. They won't necessarily work together, as just one example, but there's some of these things I'd love to ask her again, about just different aspects of the game, but she is very accessible. So that's not a complaint, really. She talks to everybody, whether it's in person or online. So
yeah.
As opposed to some other companies, which maybe aren't quite as acceptable with their game systems.
Yeah. And I think the truth of it is, like, it's going to be different times, different levels of access, right? Like, I appreciate when she or Luke with Pyreborg or whoever is accessible for a period of time, but then they often, as creatives, need to like go away, right, and hide and write. And so I value, though, when they come out of their crypt and have time to chat with us. That's great.
Well, man, I appreciate this. I love the products, and now that I not only have 2 of the books and have skimmed them a couple of times and spoken with the writer creator of said books, these are going to be working their way into my game, and some of this will probably be playing on live stream. I do a Monday night group with a couple of guys who are much better known in this hobby than I am. I'm nobody from nowhere, but they've been around doing it a long time, so it'll be fun, and we'll definitely use some of this. And I hate to admit, it's like people say, you're promoting this thing. Have you done the Kickstarter? No, I haven't. So I have to go jump in on the Kickstarter too. So I'm going to put the link in the notes, but if they wanted to just go to Kickstarter, right, and search for the Devoured Labyrinth, or
Yeah.
RPG Ramblings, and they would find it.
Exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. And then if you come after the Kickstarter, we'll have it on drive-through, and Jeff will eventually have it on the rpgramblings.com web store. So yeah.
You will be able to find it, and you're probably going to see a flood of reviews coming out. Once. What kind of time frame are we looking at on the Kickstarter? Obviously you're going to fill the Kickstarter. We all know that, but what
Yeah.
kind of time frame are you projecting? Just ballpark.
Uh,
I'm not asking for a date. It's going to be 6 months. It's going to be 3 months. It's going to be
Oh, it'll be fast. We are basically done with the PDF. We're putting the
Oh,
last bits of content in it. So the PDF will deliver as soon as I get the pledge manager up after the Kickstarter. So within a few weeks after the Kickstarter ends, probably end of July. And then we'll place the book order around the same time. Probably September is a good estimate for when the book will get to backers. Yeah.
very cool. So Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas will all be playing this
That's right.
in the Shadow Dark world. We'll
That'll be exciting.
digging into
Absolutely.
Devoured Labyrinth. All right, man. Well, I appreciate it, and thanks again. I hope we get a chance in the future to talk again. You're very kind and accommodating with your time. I appreciate that, Zach. And you're
Hey, I appreciate you
very
coming on.
talented guy as well.
Thank you.
Good stuff.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate chatting.
Yes, sir. Have a good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.